feel like hot trash, by the
You
way.
look like hot trash. No, I'm just kidding.
Wow. Wow.
You look beautiful. No, I feel that. It's a Monday. It's just like, whoa,
No,
today.
I mean, like I'm drinking tea. I don't really drink tea very often, but I like woke up with a sore throat. I think it's that time of year where I'm sleeping with the windows open and the fan on, so
Yeah.
I could have just been like all night, like, and maybe that's what's good. So maybe I'm not actually sick. But if I am sick, I'm gonna be such a baby about it. It's one of those man colds.
Oh, those are the worst.
I know, but I feel one coming on. I'm feeling like a baby. I'm feeling weak. I'm getting weaker by
When
the
I was
minute.
sick, you dragged me to the trails in Philly. So you know what? If you're on your deathbed, guess where we're going?
Yeah, but you know what? I carried your hydro flask, so you're welcome. How about that? Maybe a thank you would be in order instead of a
I'd be
criticism.
lost without you.
Finally, you admit it.
33, 1, 0. Main event of the evening. Wednesday and half past
It's Tuesday, and you're listening to Murder Unscripted.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Murder Unscripted, the show that has been recognized by the AP, the Associated Press, as
Whoop whoop.
a podcast that immerses you in the true crime genre like never before. I am your host, Ed Hydock, along with my co-host, my bestie, Cookie Puss.
I like that. No, I actually didn't know what a cookie puss was until like I saw that picture and I'm horrified now. Who would
It's
eat
not a
that?
good look. It's delicious, but it's not a good looking cake by any
It's very scary. It's like if you made John Wayne Gacy's pogo an ice cream cake,
and just
that's what it
covered it
would
in
be.
ice cream or icing. So
It's
good.
horrifying.
Well, I cannot believe, Melissa, that we are in December already.
Oh,
Like,
I
what happened
know.
to October? First of all, it was just like 80 degrees, Halloween, 80 degrees, and now snow and December. Like,
I
unbelievable.
know. It's wild.
Nuts. Well, new month means new block, new theme, new everything. So we decided to recap instead of coming up with a whole new block idea and kind of introducing all these theories. We know everybody's busy. Holidays are here and it gets to be a crazy time. So what we thought to do was to recap the first 6 months of Murder Unscripted. So we're going to kind of walk through all of our blocks, throw another case in there for every block that we've done so far. And today is what are we doing today? We're doing no body cases, right?
Yes, today is a no body case, which was the theme of like our first block of Murder Unscripted back in June 2024.
Man, it seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?
I know, doesn't it seem so long ago?
God, time flies.
Well, that's because you've been spending it with me. Time flies when you're having fun.
You know what? Whatever helps you sleep at night. If you want to think that,
Lots of pharmaceuticals. Thank you. That's how I sleep at night.
that's what helps me sleep at night.
Yeah, this will be a long one. So today we're going to talk about the murder and eventual no body conviction case of Jami Sherer. And to this day, like so late November 2024, early December, Jami's body has not been found. While researching the case, I relied heavily on a book called Empty Promises by the goddess of true crime, Her Majesty, Her Excellence, Anne Rule.
You know what I like about Anne Rule and Catherine too? Some of their books include a bunch of cases. So like you will find cases in there that you won't even find. You could probably find trails of it on the internet, but you want to pull some like really deep dark stories out. That's where you find them is in these books.
That's absolutely where I find so many of our cases. I'll be
Hmm.
like, oh my gosh, I feel like there was a little blurb about it in another Anne
Yep.
Rule book. So then I go back and look.
Yep. That's all you need.
So we're going to start this episode by talking about our victim, which is Jami Hagel Sherer. And Jami was born on December 1st in 1963, making her only 26 years old at the time of her disappearance, which when I was like sitting there thinking about this and realizing she was only 26, I was like, holy crap, because I just feel like she did so much in those 26 years and she made such an impact on so many people.
It's a shame. 26 is you barely started living yet.
Exactly, and especially with her, like, she had so much to live for and just so many good things, I think, awaiting her, and she
Mhm,
didn't get to them,
mhm.
unfortunately. So, Jamie was born in North Dakota, but when she was about 3 years old, she and her family, which was made up of her parents, Judy and Jerry Hagel, and then her brother Randy, who was 5 years old, they packed up and they moved to Bellevue, Washington, and they kind of went out there in hopes of a better life for like the family and also to be closer to Judy's family. So, within a year of being out there, Judy actually gave birth to twin boys. So, it was Randy, the oldest, then Jamie, and then the twin boys. And Judy would talk about how, like, Jamie loved helping with her little brothers and how, like, Jamie would entertain one baby while, like, Judy took care of and fed and changed the other.
How cool. She was like a second mom.
Right. And it's like, I can't even imagine having one kid, let alone two. Oh my God.
It's a
I feel like you
lot.
need all the help you can get.
All hands on deck.
I have two dogs and I'm like exhausted. So, growing up, Jamie was a super teeny tiny little child. Like, her mom actually had to order her specialty clothing because she was so little. Even when she was an adult, she was barely 5 feet tall and weighed only about 95 pounds. She was teeny tiny. And as an adult, she kind of looked a little bit like Sarah Michelle Gellar of like
Mhm.
Buffy fame.
I can see that.
Yeah. So in the book Empty Promises, Anne Rule writes about how as a child, Jamie, quote, looked like a little doll with bright brown eyes, dark hair, and a lovely smile. She could give as good as she got from her brothers, end quote. Rule also wrote about how even though Jamie was like a tomboy and she was tiny, she was really self assured and super duper fearless. Like she could go with the best of them. And growing up, she was really smart, she was bubbly, she was confident, and just from, like, reading about her, I got the feeling that she was just one of those people who just, like, woke up happy and was just, like, excited for life, and, like, that excitement was contagious. Like, if you look at pictures of her smiling, her whole face just lights up. Like, some people, when they smile, it, like, even reaches up to their eyes and they sparkle, and she was absolutely one of those people. I think that that's part of the reason, like, this case was tough for me, like, she just broke my heart. She was just this beautiful, confident, vivacious young woman who literally had the world at her fingertips, like, she was smart. She actually had a really great job in the HR department at Microsoft.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, like, she's a smart, capable young woman, and she's
Yeah.
hardworking, and all of her coworkers just adored her, and she had really great friends, and they were amazing, they were supportive, her family was super close and super supportive, and then she met Steven Sherer, and the fact that the world lost such a bright light because of that asshole, like, is just the biggest tragedy. So we don't really have an exact date on when Jamie and Steven met. It was either late of 1985 or early 1986. So Jamie was 22 years old when she met Steven. He was 24. And he was this like motorcycle riding, spoiled rich kid with a bad temper, a criminal record a mile long, and just a serious attitude problem. And if you look at him, he's very 80s. He actually looked like if Emilio Estevez and David Spade had a baby, that would be him.
You know, you
So,
told me that a while before when we were talking about this case, so I made you a little something.
what'd you make?
What do you think of this picture? David Estevez.
Oh my god. That's pretty amazing. And that's pretty on point for Steven Sherer, isn't it?
Thank you, face swap.
Right? Oh my god, that's pretty good.
Sorry, moving on.
Well, yeah, that's kind of who he looked like. And Anne Rule wrote in the book about how Steven would bleach his mustache so it was blonde. Like, what a
What
douche.
a weirdo.
And in pictures, his outfits are so like 1980s Miami Vice. Like, it's ridiculous. And Steven was not a very tall man at all. He was about like 5'7". He was jacked though. Like, he was
Hmm.
obsessed with the gym and his muscles. And he definitely had that, like, I'm a tiny little man, so I have to overcompensate for it by acting like I'm God's gift to the world kind of thing. And I just want to be like, shut the hell up. Like, let's call this what it is. You are a teeny tiny man, and we all know what you're compensating for. Oh, let me clear it up for you. His teeny weeny. That is what he's compensating for, my friend. Clearly. So, Teeny Weeny Sherer was born on November 4th, 1961, to David and Sherry Sherer, and he was the oldest of three. He had two younger sisters. And Steven's family was incredibly wealthy thanks to his dad's construction company. Um, Steven's father had a really, really good work ethic. Unfortunately, Steven did not inherit that trait for his father, but he did inherit his father's outrageous temper and penchant for alcohol, which
Oh,
we know can
great.
be a dangerous combination.
Yes, it can.
So he's a spoiled, rich, angry, lazy drunk, basically, is where we're going with this.
Recipe for disaster.
Oh, yeah. And like throughout his entire life, this kid could not stay out of trouble. Like into adulthood, he would go out to bars and just like start picking fights with random dudes. And then his like whole rap sheet, it had drug charges, driving under the influence. He even had a conviction of felony assault against a former girlfriend.
Wow.
This is horrifying. So we're going to call this woman Bettina because that's what Anne called her. So Steven beat this woman up so badly that she had to be hospitalized. And when this amazing woman finally got the courage to leave, she like went into their shared apartment to get her stuff. She found that Steven had decapitated all of her stuffed animals and dolls and left a note on them saying, "I'll do this to you."
Are you kidding me? Like that's the
No, like
okay, so not only is that creepy, but it's also like really childish. Like, and
mhm.
that one single act tells me everything I need to know about this guy.
It took years for this poor woman to be rid of Steven. Like, she was granted protection orders, the police were called several times, but none of this mattered to Steven. Like, he was never held accountable for anything. And even when he began dating Jami, he continued to torment that woman. Another example of his volatile temper was when he literally attempted to kill a police officer with his bare hands.
Oh my god. How is he
This
not in
dude
jail?
is nuts. Exactly. He like either gets off or has ridiculously short sentences. And obviously, Jamie's family and friends are not impressed by Steven and they voice their concerns to Jamie, but that unfortunately fell on deaf ears.
I feel like that happens in a lot of these cases that we tell, but also in real life. Like when you have a friend and they're with someone that you know isn't right for them, or that you get like kind of a bad vibe, but they put
Mhm.
those rose colored glasses on, and it's like it's so hard to see what other people are seeing. So and then unfortunately it often ends with something bad, but be it a breakup in most situations or murder.
It's so true. And like so many abusers, Steven could be super charismatic and he was really great at charming people, especially the women he was interested in. But of course, the honeymoon phase never lasted very long, and soon Steven began controlling and abusing Jamie. And like at the beginning, Jamie thought Steven's jealousy was exciting. Like it felt good to be desired. And of like it that did get old real quick, but Steven just kept pushing and he began insisting that Jamie dye her hair blonde. He insisted that she get breast implants and he was like obsessed with her weight. He wanted to ensure that she did not gain a pound. And apparently Jamie like loved M&Ms and Steven wouldn't let her have them. But like let's remember though, Jamie weighed less than 100 pounds. Like
Yeah, so she
she
could
didn't
literally eat
eat
M&Ms all
all
day, every
day
day. Yeah.
long. Yeah, she did not need to watch her weight. And this is so weird, but Steven also insisted that Jamie wear really revealing clothing. Like, he loved the reactions that his wife got from, well, Jamie, his girlfriend at the time, or later wife, got from other men, which is just
Hmm.
so odd. And I watched several interviews with Jamie's mom and her friends, and like they all knew that Steven was physically, emotionally, and mentally abusive to Jamie.
Mhm.
But of course, she would explain the bruises away with, oh, I walked into something, or oh, I tripped. She once told a friend that she loved Steven and he only lost his temper because he loved her so much and couldn't live without her.
God, it's awful.
And Steven definitely had like the typical pattern of a textbook abuser. He was controlling and abusive, but then when he sobered up, he would participate in love bombing his partner, who, at the time was Jami. And Anne Rule actually wrote something that I just thought was so incredible. And she really did say it best when she wrote, quote, "No one is as pitiful as a batterer when he swears he will never ever hit a woman again." End quote.
I have a friend who I know listens to this podcast, and she was going through something very similar to this. And it was tough to see because it was my first real experience watching basically an abusive relationship unfold. You hear about them, you read about them, but I'd never seen it. And it's
Mm-hmm.
sad because you watch your friend go through this and there's nothing you can do to help. And it's like, it was shit like using her own hands to hit her and and then love bombing her immediately after and treating her like a punching bag and then trying to turn her kids against her. And it was this cycle of just awful behavior that is not right in any
Yeah.
in a friendship, in a relationship, whatever. And there's a special place in hell for people like that.
God, I hope so. And you know what? A lot of times the victim just doesn't see it, or
Hmm.
it becomes so part of everyday life that they almost don't realize it's wrong, even though deep down they know that they're worth so much more than that.
Yeah, and you're in your comfort zone. You're in this is my life, so this is all I know.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's very hard to make big changes like that. But we're in the mid 1980s at this point, and Jami and Steven had decided to leave Washington and they moved to California for a little bit. Now, from the outside, we can look at this as a classic abuser move. He's taking her away from her family, he's keeping her isolated from her friends and family. Like that's very typical. But for Jamie, she saw this as a fresh start. Things were going to be better. They were in a new place, different stress level. Like she just thought it would be better. It would be different. Unfortunately, though, things were not better. And Stephen continued to have issues with the law and spent time in and out of jail. And of course, like I said earlier, he got off on almost all the charges, or he just simply had to pay a fine. No big. So, of course, Stephen never actually learned any kind of lesson. Now, while he was locked up, he and Jamie would write each other these super dramatic and like passionate love letters. And there were several excerpts of them in the book. And wow.
It's weird to me that if she was being abused, I could see tolerating it and dealing with it because that, like we said, that's the life you know. But then for her to write these kind of intense love letters, that's a little strange to me. Like, I feel like you can be neutral to the situation, but then why go above and beyond? Was it to maybe placate Steven?
No, to me, I think at this point he had brainwashed her to the point that she and like broken her spirit and broken like this love and respect she had for
Hmm,
herself. Like he had destroyed all of that. So
wow.
she was fully dependent and literally felt like she was nothing without him.
That's terrible. But that's what these people do, right? It's all about the
Yes,
control.
absolutely. And I can also see from her standpoint with him being away, absence makes the heart grow fonder, and you almost forget about the horrible things because they're
That's a good
away
point.
and you
Yeah.
miss them. And then they come back, and then you're like, shit, because all of it comes back with them. So I think it was a
Wow.
lot of things.
Interesting.
So during the short instances that he would actually be out of prison, he would jump from job to job, never lasting very long. At one point, they were really struggling financially because, surprise, surprise, cocaine and legal fees are not cheap.
You're telling me.
I knew, I knew
Kidding.
you'd know.
Kidding. Kidding. I do not have any legal problems.
If someone offered you coke, you would literally probably be like, "Do you have diet?" Like,
Do you make Diet Coke? I'm watching my girlish figure.
exactly. So they're struggling financially. She's the only one working. He's blowing it all on drugs and alcohol and his lawyer. So they were renting a double wide trailer at the time, and I guess they had an extra room. So they decided to look for a roommate to help with the rent. They find a roommate who Anne Rule referred to as Sally. So Sally was a young professional woman. She worked a lot. She was actually some sort of PR rep or publicist for celebrities. So she really didn't hang out very often with Jamie and Steven, but there was one night in December of 1986. It was right around Christmas time, and they were all home and they all decided to have a drink together. And everything started out really chill, but it quickly went downhill. And the book has a ton of detail about this entire attack, but to summarize, Sally said that everything was cool, started out fine, and then slowly over the night, Steven and Jamie just started bickering. First, it was about little things here and there, but then it turned to arguing, which then escalated into an actual fight.
Man,
Stuff's getting broken, they're screaming at each other.
wow.
So right in the middle of this screaming match, Jamie just stops arguing. She looks at Steven and she's like, "This is it. This is over." And she begins to walk away when Steven said, "Shut the fuck up. I'll kill you."
Man, this Sally must be like, wow, great. Probably should have picked a different roommate. Holy
Right?
cow.
And Sally's witnessing all of this. And she would later say that when Steven said that, he was rabid. He was breathing heavy and his eyes were wide and just
Wow. Like a switch flipped.
yes, it was she says that actually. And so he kind of snaps out of that and he starts to try to physically fight Jamie. She's running around the room, hiding behind furniture. Sally's able to get to a phone in another room, but she just dials 911 and then she leaves the phone out on the bed or whatever. And then she runs back to try and help Jamie. Steven is in the living room screaming that he's going to kill both women. Then he pulls out a kitchen knife and stabs himself in the stomach. And
What?
then he takes off and runs out of the trailer.
What a lunatic.
Exactly. And thank God the police get there pretty quickly. They take Steven to the hospital. Poor Sally is like, what in God's name just
What just
happened?
happened? Right.
And she also talks about how when he stabbed himself in the stomach, his face was just blank. There was no emotion, which to me just somehow makes it so much worse.
It's like he switches into monster mode.
Yes,
Wow.
crazy. And this last part is a huge ass bummer. So this happened the next day. Jamie and Sally are home together, and I guess Sally was like, you gotta get out of here. What is happening?
Yeah.
And Jamie told Sally, quote, "This wouldn't have happened if Steve didn't love me so much." End quote.
Man, I've thought about this so many times because it comes up in almost every other case. There's something like this,
Mm-hmm.
why women defend abusive men. And I feel like it's so complex, like the real answer. And the only thing
Yeah.
I can think of, have you ever heard of the term what is it? Internalized misogyny? Have you heard of
No.
that? So
No.
it's basically like when women are taught from an early age, or it's things they hear from their parents or teachers that it's like stereotypes, I guess is the best way to put it. So like an example would be a rape victim who the girls will say, well, she dressed so slutty, so she was asking for it.
Oh,
It's
victim
things like
shaming.
that.
Yeah.
So they absorb this, and then that's kind of they start to believe it over time. So I maybe that's what's going on here, or what we talked about earlier, that she was so dependent on Steven that's why she defended him. I don't know.
Yeah. And I also think that there are certain things on TV and stuff that almost glamorize this stuff. Even the Lifetime movies, where someone's always beating the wife. The guy's always, and I know he's an actor, but he's always very handsome. And it's just there's a weird, sick, romanticizing of
Hmm.
it sometimes.
It's very strange, and I would love to dive into this with an actual psychologist. Maybe that's why we have Catherine on. Maybe she can help.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, whatever the reason, unfortunately, Jamie does decide to forgive Steven. And despite heavy warnings please, everything from her family and friends. Jami and Steven were married in 1987. Jami looked like a freaking princess. Like, she had this huge white wedding gown and this amazingly 80s fabulous bedazzled headpiece. She looked like 1980s Barbie gets married. She was breathtakingly stunning.
Wow, but how much of that was Steven going, "This is what I want you to look like for my wedding"?
Well, that's true. Good call. Well, of course, the marriage didn't change anything. Steven's abuse continued to get worse each day. But then it changes a little bit. Like, we still have the mental, emotional, and physical abuse, but pretty soon Steven began sexually abusing Jami.
Hmm.
He started like pestering her to participate in threesomes and like sex with other men so he could watch.
Hmm.
And then he would actually set up these like sexual escapades with friends of his and even posted ads in adult magazines. And like, we do not kink shame here. Like, you do you. But if your partner isn't into that fetish, that's when it stops being okay. And we're
Yeah.
going to shame that. So,
Totally. Well, and you could tell that it was almost like a foregone conclusion that this would be the next thing because, I mean, if you are flaunting your wife or your girlfriend around town and getting off on the
mhm.
reactions from men, this is like without a doubt the next step.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's
Yeah.
just so screwed up. And again, if she was into it, cool, awesome,
But
but
she wasn't.
consent.
Yeah.
So over time, this is happening, and then over time, they're still fighting all the time, Jami and Steven. And one time was so bad that Steven actually pulled Jami's hair so hard, he ripped a piece of her scalp out of her
Oh
head.
my God.
Steven was always obsessed that Jami was like lying to him or sneaking around behind his back. He was so obsessed with her that he would go to her work, the actual like Microsoft headquarters, and he would walk around this building like he owned the place with his stupid ass pastel Miami Vice chest puffed out like he owned it. And security actually had to tell him to leave because he was such a distraction. So he would just stand outside and stare at the building. But how creepy is that? Like a goddamn psychopath, like just standing outside in this like courtyard, just staring up at her window, like all day long.
Control, 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 control. I own you. You do not
Yeah,
go anywhere. You do not talk to anyone. This is you're mine, and I'm going to make sure of it.
he's sick. And everyone told Anne Rule the same thing about how he was just like downright mean to her. Steven would talk down to Jami. He would put her down, like especially in front of people. And friends and family just said that Jami became a shell of like the once beautiful, confident, vibrant woman that they all knew and loved. And I mentioned at the beginning of this episode that like this case has stuck with me since I read about it. And I feel like this is why. Clearly, I didn't know Jami, but from reading Anne Rule's book, I feel like I did get to know her, and like reading along, it was like watching this beautiful and like genuinely like beautiful woman inside and out, just like watching her descend into someone that no one recognized anymore. And like, if I'm heartbroken for Jami as like a complete outsider, like her family must have been in so much pain and turmoil, like having to watch this.
Yeah, and I doing this for so long, like the only way to give these stories the credit they deserve is to immerse yourself in them, and that means like
Yeah.
learning everything you can about the victim and reading these articles. So by the time you've absorbed the case, you do feel like you know that person, but then add the element of talking to their family and hearing firsthand, like you see the words on paper take on a totally different meaning when you're hearing it from somebody, and that's when you really truly feel like you know the victim. And that's it helps you tell their story, to be completely honest, because now you respect them and you feel like you're telling it about a person and not just a story in the papers.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And again, her poor family, like this whole time, they're forced to watch this from the sidelines. And Judy, that's Jamie's mom, she knew she had to tread carefully because Steven had already threatened to move Jamie away from her if he felt like if Steven felt like Judy was interfering too much. He was like, I'll
Mhm.
move even further than California.
Hmm.
Because they did eventually move back to Washington. But, Judy's like, I gotta be careful. She couldn't bear the thought of being separated from not only her daughter, but now she had a grandson.
That's that control, though. That's you hit him where it hurts.
Yep. He was unfortunately, an expert abuser. Like,
So sad.
so I don't know the exact date, but I believe it was 1989. Jamie gave birth to their son, Tyler Sherer. And Jamie was just immediately head over heels in love. And she just fell right into this role of being like super mom.
It's awesome.
By September of 1990, Jamie, I think reality had sunk in, and she was discussing with friends her plan to leave Steven. And she was starting to make these plans, and she even had a place to stay. Like, she had a friend nearby who was recently divorced, and that friend offered to let Jamie and Tyler stay with her and her kids and kind of be like, make their own little family. And like, the friend could help with Jamie and her kid, and vice versa. And Anne Rule wrote about how, like I said, at this point in time, Jamie knew this relationship was toxic, and she knew that Steven was never going to change. And she also knew that she could not stay.
I'm surprised that she brought a kid into this world. And maybe it was not, maybe it was Steven's idea. Maybe she was doing it just to like, that always blows my mind that when you know you're in an abusive situation with someone that you barely love, why on earth would you bring a child into an awful situation like this? It doesn't help.
No, it doesn't. And I think there's a lot of reasons. I would be willing to bet in this situation it was Steven.
I would think so too. It sounds like it.
Yeah. But I feel like when she had Tyler, like, we already know, we talked about this, that Steven had like managed to break Jamie's love for herself, but like, no matter what Steven did, he could not and would not break the love that she had for Tyler. So on Sunday, September 30th, 1990, it seems like everything just came to a head. Steven and Jamie began arguing pretty early that morning because Jamie had actually spent the night away from Steven, and he was like demanding to know where she was. So Jamie left the situation. She drove to her mother's house to tell her mom that she was like done with Steven. And of course, within minutes of Jamie arriving to her mom's house, the phone starts ringing. It was, of course, Steven demanding to speak to Jamie, who she's like, I'm not talking to him. So he just keeps calling and calling and calling. Finally, after like dozens of phone calls and like arguments through Judy, like on Jamie's side and then Steven's side, Jamie finally takes the phone, and according to Judy, Jamie tells Steven, Steve, it's over. I don't love you anymore. I want a divorce. It's over.
Good for her.
Right? And Judy's like ecstatic.
Yeah, I get it.
Jamie was finally going to leave this horrifically toxic shitbag. But Steven is on the phone begging Jamie to meet him to talk. And Jamie agrees to meet him in person. And Judy is like begging her not to go, but Jamie was adamant. And she left, Tyler with her parents. And as she leaves her parents' house, Judy says something about like, please be careful, please be safe. Jamie promised she would be fine, and she responded with, quote, all he can do is kill me, Mom, end quote.
Jeez, oh man, I feel like that innocuous, like that one little statement is just was proof that she knew what Steven was capable of, but like she maybe didn't think he would actually do it.
I
But
don't think,
still,
I don't think
wow,
she thought he would do it.
that's so. What's that word? Foreshadowing. Foreboding.
Yes.
Yeah.
So eerie. So Jamie meets up with Steven, and I'm not sure if they even actually got to talk, but Steven grabbed Jamie's purse and literally ran away down the street with it.
What a weirdo.
He's so weird. Like, it was speculated later that maybe he was looking for evidence of like Jamie seeing someone else.
That's exactly what he was doing.
Yeah, I think it was a mix between that and just being an asshole.
Being a dick, yeah.
Yeah, so Jamie sold her car keys, so she goes home, like, to her and Steven's house. She calls her mom. She, reiterated that she was officially done with Steven. She was gonna go take a shower. She was gonna pack a bag for herself and some stuff for Tyler, and then she was gonna head over to Judy's. So Jamie does all of that stuff. She calls her mom around noon, and this is that Sunday, and she tells Judy, "I'll be there shortly to get Tyler." Because, like I said, he had been staying with her parents for that weekend. And she explained that she was going to stop at a fast food place. It was like her favorite place. It was a taco place. She was going to stop there and then be over. And Judy said that was fine. She's like, "I'll see you soon." And she's like expecting Jamie to arrive within the next 30 to 35 minutes.
Okay.
But next thing she knows, an hour had gone by and Judy's starting to get concerned. Like, there were a lot of red flags, like, right off the bat, because Jamie is very punctual, very responsible. And if she had to be somewhere at a certain time, like, she would be there, especially when it came to Tyler.
Mm-hmm.
And Judy also knows, like, with all the tension and all the shit going on, like, if she got caught up doing something, she would have figured out a way to call and let her mom know.
Right.
Now, another red flag was the lack of communication from Steven. Because remember, he had just been calling a gajillion times not that long ago, and now all of a sudden we haven't heard from him.
Yeah.
So throughout the day, Judy is just like continuing to worry, but she tries to stay calm for Tyler. Like, she doesn't want to let on. And like, obviously the toddler's not going to understand what's going on, but like, I do feel like kids pick up on shit when something's wrong. Like,
Absolutely.
they're not dumb. They pick up on your energy. So she's trying to stay calm for Tyler. But by Monday morning, Judy is in a full-blown panic. And she starts calling Jamie's office like first thing that morning. And she would later explain, like, she was just hoping that Jamie would answer. There would be some sort of explanation. They would move on. But that didn't happen. Jamie's phone, she keeps calling. It's ringing, ringing. I think at some point, someone, like maybe her assistant or something, finally picked it up and was like, "No, like, she's not here today." So at about 9 a.m. that morning, Judy calls the police. And she explains that Jamie was missing. Neither Judy nor Steven had any idea where she was, because she did call Steven at some point, and he's like, "No, I don't know. I haven't talked to her." So Judy and Steven actually drive to the police station to file a missing person report together on Jamie.
Can you imagine what that ride over there must have been like? Because
Oh
Judy,
my
I
God.
guarantee, was probably thinking the entire time that Steven had something to do with this, but she's too scared to confront him. Or she's too
Mm-hmm.
worried about her daughter to like, at that point, it's the focus is and should be about her daughter. So maybe she just didn't point fingers at that point, even despite what she was thinking in her head.
Yeah, not to just even like knock him out and be like, "Where the hell is she?" Like, she
Yeah.
managed to keep herself restrained. So the police take the report and they decide to go over to Jamie and Steven's house, and everything looks fine. There's no signs of a struggle, no forced entry. So police ask Steven if he had any idea where his wife could be, and he carefully admits that he and Jamie had gotten into an argument the day prior. Right before she was supposed to leave to pick up Tyler, they got in this argument. And Steven said that, Jamie had gotten upset. She had grabbed some clothing of hers, a couple other things, and she stormed out. And that was the last time he had seen or spoken to her. So police are like, "Oh, well, they just got in an argument and she went off somewhere to cool down." And Judy is like, "No, absolutely not. She would not leave Tyler."
Mm-hmm.
But again, the police are just like, it's fine. They just were convinced that this was a domestic dispute. Jamie would be back soon. So over the next couple days, the police are still not doing anything. And Judy's becoming more and more suspicious of her son-in-law, who was engaging in some seriously odd behavior, even for his weirdo ass.
I
Like,
was going to
this shit
say,
was
if he
weird.
hasn't already. Yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, there was the lack of phone calls from Steven the day that Jamie was disappeared. Like,
Mhm.
he had called Judy's house only like twice, once around 12:15 p.m. and then not again till 6:30 p.m. So Judy confronts Steven, like, "Why didn't you call me every 15 seconds like you normally do?" He tells her, "Oh, I went to my mom's house and I fell asleep."
There is no chance that for somebody who claimed he loved Jamie the way he did, that he fell asleep without knowing where she was. I mean, this guy knew her every single move. So bold-faced lie.
Yeah, and alarm bells are going off in Judy's head. So then another weird thing was about Steven's car. He had like a Chevy Blazer and it was like a mess. It was a total mess, always had been. Steven liked it that way. He didn't care about it one way or another. So later, he overhears Steven making an appointment to have his car detailed. And she's like, "Why are you getting your car detailed? Like, first of all, since when do you care? And second of all, why right now, when your wife is missing, is this high on your to-do list?"
Right.
So he quickly, of course, has an answer for it. And he explains, this is so classy, he spilled beer in his car and he was really nervous that he would get pulled over for something and the police would smell the beer. And given his expansive history of DUI and drunk driving incidents, that, could actually be a logical answer. But the day after Jamie disappeared, remember, they went looking for Jamie and went to the police station in Steven's car. So, like, it had definitely been a mess, but there was no bad smell and it didn't smell like beer or anything like that.
Weird.
So we could spend like the next day talking about like all the weird and strange shit that Steven did like after her disappearance. But for now, I'm just going to tell you one more. He began wearing a pair of Jamie's panties around his arm. Ew.
What?
And he told people it made him feel closer to Jamie.
This dude was out of his mind.
Right? And like, I don't know if they were clean or dirty or whatever, but I'm like so
Doesn't matter.
grossed out. That's so creepy. That's so weird. So 9 days after Jamie has disappeared, no one has seen her, no leads, police still don't care. Her family contacts the media because they're like, if you guys aren't going to do anything, we're going to do something. So they contact the media to get Jamie's name and information. They just want to get some kind of like tip. They even offered a $10,000 reward.
Wow.
And according to Jamie's mom, they went to the media because, like I said, like they just feel like the police didn't care. So after the media appearance, Jamie's family received one helpful tip, I guess. Her car had actually been found. So she had a 1980 Mazda RX-7, and it was found in the parking lot of a church located about like 40 minutes away from her and Steven's home. And it was really especially strange because like Jamie had no links to this church. She had never been there. She didn't know anyone there. She wasn't that religion, etc. So the first thing that police noticed was that the driver's seat was totally pushed back. And remember, Jamie was super duper tiny. Like we talked about that at the beginning. She was barely 5 foot tall. But again, her seat was pushed all the way back. So that's weird. And then another strange thing is they find her duffel bag in the car. And that's not weird. Steven said she grabbed a couple things to leave, but like the contents of the bag raised some eyebrows. There was nothing in there for Tyler, no clothing, no nothing for him. And the bag only had like loungewear, like sweatpants and stuff. Like there wasn't anything that Jamie could wear to work.
That's a big red flag. The thing about Tyler is huge.
Right. There's nothing for him. Like he's a toddler. He probably needs a new outfit like several times during the day. So when police find the car, they actually bring in a bloodhound to attempt to pick up Jamie's scent. So the police give the dog an article of her clothing. The dog immediately catches the scent. So they follow this bloodhound away from the car, down a few blocks, and then the dog stops. The police pupper stopped at a bus stop. So, of course, the police are like, oh, we told you she ran away. She's starting a new life. Oh, well. And Jamie's family and friends are like, they just disputed this. They were like, absolutely not.
Sure.
So after they find Jamie's car, police are finally like, all right, maybe we should look into this. So they bring Steven back in for another interview, and he goes and he tells them, I had nothing to do with it, but I know who did. And police are like,
here we go.
Oh yeah, buckle in. Steven claimed that the fight they had on the day she disappeared was because Jami had been having an affair with a man named Toby Parker. And Steven was adamant to these officers that Toby had something to do with Jami's disappearance. So now the police are like, all right, who the hell is Toby Parker?
Right.
So they find out that Toby was sort of a friend and I believe a coworker of Steven Sherer. And he had been introduced to Jami through Steve to take part in one of Steven's weird, gross sexual fantasies.
I figured that's where you were going.
Yeah. Toby was one of the men who Steven had arranged to have sex with Jami. And remember, Steven set all of these up and like did the newspaper clippings and stuff like that, like put ads in the newspaper.
Yeah.
But guess what? The shit backfired when legitimate feelings developed between Jami and Toby.
Wow.
And just a side note, like Steven actually started recording all of these sexual encounters and like
Of course he did. Yeah.
he acted like he was directing a porno. Like police found the tape with Toby and Jami and it was crystal clear that both Jami and Toby were heavily drugged.
Oh, no kidding.
Oh yeah, like they were going through the motions, but apparently like Jami like glazed eyes, just totally like checked out. So even though Jami did actually develop feelings for Toby, like she genuinely liked him, Toby wasn't the most upstanding citizen. He had a lengthy criminal record with charges ranging from drugs to assault. He was like a small-time drug dealer and he had had a cocaine addiction for several years. He was married, but they were separated. There was a Paula Zahn episode on this case, and Jami's friends talk about Toby and how he was like not the guy they thought their friends should be with. And when her friends would ask her, like, Jami, why are you with him? She would respond with, quote, Toby is nice to me. He treats me well, end quote.
You're in such a vulnerable state that anybody who comes along and shows you any kind of positive attention or just affection, I mean, sounds like that's what this was.
You're right. Like Anne Rule, like basically says what you just said. She wrote, quote, Steve had undermined her self-confidence to a point where she couldn't leave him until she had another man to leap to, end quote. And like you said, like I think it's safe to say, like we've all been there. After a breakup, you're feeling crappy about yourself and your whole life in general. And I think it's normal to kind of have a rebound to like make yourself feel better.
Right. But then think about this from Toby's standpoint. So Toby, he falls in love with Jami, and that's all he's guilty of at this point, you know.
Yeah.
But now he's a suspect in her disappearance. I feel bad for Toby. I know he
I
wasn't the
do
best.
too.
Yeah.
Like Steven set this whole thing up. Just the whole situation's awful.
Yeah.
But you know, once police look into Toby a little bit more and they see his rough background, they're like, oh, we got to talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
So the police bring him into the station and they can tell that Toby's like legitimately shaken up about Jami's disappearance. And when police tell Toby that A, they knew he and Jami were having an affair, and B, Steven pointed the finger at him, Toby was like, no, absolutely not. I had nothing to do with Jami's disappearance. You need to look at Steven. Like, Steven had made threats to Jami that if she ever tried to leave him, he would kill her. And Toby knew about these threats. So, unfortunately, now police are in the middle of a he said with Steven Sherer and Toby Parker. So by now, Judy's completely frustrated with the police. They had actually made the decision to close Jami's missing persons case because to them, they still wholeheartedly believed she got up and walked away from her life.
No chance.
I know. So they said, there's no crime here. Bye. And Judy spent the next several years chasing down leads by herself. She consulted with private investigators. The woman even reached out to psychics. Like, she just wanted to find
desperate.
her daughter. Yeah. And, like, you're probably wondering, like, if Jami is spending all of her time, energy, and money on searching for Jami, what on earth is Steven doing?
Nothing. I would guess nothing. Or sleeping with somebody else already.
Okay, good. Because if you were going to say grieving or searching for Jami, you would be so wrong.
Not a chance.
Within weeks, mere weeks of Jami disappearing, Steven's dating multiple women. He continues to
There you
drink
go.
excessively, use cocaine, drive under the influence. He's picking fights with random strangers. And of course, his criminal record is growing and growing. At one point, this is in like 1991, Steven begins dating a 16-year-old girl.
I don't even have words for this guy at this point.
He's fucking disgusting. And like now pedophile predator can be added to the list of reasons why Steven Sherer is a sicko. So he was either like 26 or 28 at the time, which is disgusting. She's 16. And just like with Jami and all of his other girlfriends, Steven was incredibly abusive and cruel to the 16-year-old girl. He even pulled a gun on her once. He put it to her head and asked her if she had ever played Russian roulette.
It's so terrifying.
This is kind of weird. He would like make the girl dress up in Jami's clothes.
He was
Yeah.
obsessed.
He was obsessed. And here's another weird thing I forgot to mention. He was always dragging around this like beat up blue suitcase. Nobody knew why and nobody knew what was in it.
Did they look? Was Jami in it?
No, but stick a pin
God.
in that. They did think that for a while.
Wow.
So we're cruising right through the 90s, and over the next few years, Jami's case fades from news. Investigators closed the case, moved on. Steven continues to party, snort cocaine, drink, start fight, and of course, be in and out of jail. One very small glimmer of brightness in this case is that Judy and Jami's dad, Jerry, they did get custody of little Tyler.
Good.
So,
And that's the linchpin in this whole thing, because she would not have left with. That's how you know she didn't leave on her own, because of Tyler.
exactly, 100%. But then in 1997, everything changed. And now to introduce our MU MVP of the week, Lieutenant Jim Taylor. So in January of 97, Lieutenant Taylor, he took over the Redmond Police Department Criminal Investigations Unit. So Taylor decides to go through the old cold cases. He decides to start going through files, seeing what he can do. And he comes across Jami's file and he just becomes enthralled with the case. And he quickly realized how many mess ups there were with the first investigation. So Lieutenant Taylor decides then and there that while he may never be able to find Jami, he is going to get her justice. Like he was hell-bent on this. And he decides to start the investigation from scratch. So he brings in some fresh eyes, like new team members, and he officially reopens Jami's case. And when he goes to contact Judy, she is cautiously optimistic, I think is a safe way to say it. You know, she had been burned so many times in the past, but she does say, like, this time felt different. So Lieutenant Taylor moved quickly to put together this task force, and he contacted this woman named Marilyn Brenneman, the King County Assistant Prosecuting Attorney. And just like Donna Pendergrass last week, this woman is a badass babe. So we have had two amazing prosecutor baddies the last couple weeks, and that's awesome. So after Lieutenant Taylor has his team, he goes to check. This is so cool. He checks like the entire United States and Canada for any sign that Jami could be alive. Like he did not cut any corners. He just wanted to be absolutely sure that Jami was not actually somewhere living a new life.
Mm-hmm.
So on May 12th, 1997, the King County Medical Examiner declared Jami Hagel Sherer legally dead.
That's
We've
huge.
talked about this. Yes.
Yep.
We've talked about like how many doors that opens.
Yep. It's a big step.
So the next step for Lieutenant Taylor and his team, they consult with other law enforcement agencies and other prosecutors. And like, this is so huge to me. Like, Lieutenant Taylor was part of the thing that made him so incredible. Like, he did not come into this investigation with an ego. He was not afraid to ask for outside help. I mean, This man used every asset he had, and he got help from his contacts all across the United States. Like, this is so freaking cool. He basically, anywhere Steven went, like, regardless of where he went in the United States, Lieutenant Taylor had eyes on him.
Good.
Like, in addition to him watching Steven, Lieutenant Taylor and his team ended up, like, talking to and interviewing over 300 people. In all these interviews that they did, one of the more interesting interviews was with one of Jamie's brothers, because they had never been spoken to the first time. So the night before Jamie disappeared, this was Saturday, September 29th, Steven and one of Jamie's brothers had been driving around looking for her because she wasn't officially missing, but she didn't come home that night. She was out with Toby, we now know. So later, Steven and the brother Rob, they go to a bar, and while they're at the bar, Steven just starts like bitching about Jamie, and he looks at her brother and said, quote, "If I find out she's cheating on me, I'll kill her."
Oh
End
my
quote.
God. You can't make statements like that.
Right? So Lieutenant Taylor and his team, they also re-interviewed Toby Parker, and even all these years later, Toby was still so upset by Jamie's disappearance and like still felt so guilty about like not being able to save her.
Sure. And he cared about her, and there's no answers.
Right, exactly. And I mean, he's still kind of under a cloud of suspicion, I'm sure.
Sure.
Luckily, though, Taylor and his team do quickly rule out Toby as a suspect. And the next person they talk to is Sally. That was the California roommate who had to witness the terrifying knife attack in the mobile home that ended with Steven stabbing himself. Like, I wish you would have stabbed a little harder, bro, and
Yeah,
just
I was just gonna
ended this.
say.
We could have been done.
Yeah. Shoot for a major artery, if you will, next time.
Seriously, please do everyone a favor. So all these interviews are going on, and Steven's still in and out of prison. He's still partying. His drug use is out of control. He had pretty much become like addicted to sex at this point. And instead of finding a job, he chose to essentially become a scam artist. He often told people like he was a widower, but each time he talked about how Jamie died, he had a different story. That's another thing. He's telling people he's a widower. What? I thought she ran
Yeah.
away to. Yeah.
He's a scumbag.
And like this whole time, all these years, Steven never displayed remorse for Jamie. He had remorse for himself.
That's exactly
He's
right.
the victim here. How could this happen to him? How could he be dealt like in this situation? He gets word, that there's new investigators on this case looking into it. So just to prove to you how friggin' dumb he is, he calls Lieutenant Taylor, and he also called Marilyn Brenneman. He left a voicemail for her, so we have the recording. He literally threatened both of them, saying that they better drop their investigation or he would
else.
go out and cut someone's fucking throat.
How this guy was allowed to walk around unchecked for this long is
How do you
mind-boggling.
tie your shoes in the morning, sir? He must have clip-ons. Like,
They're Merrill's, they're slides.
I don't understand. Like, threatening a public official with physical harm, that's like a felony, bro.
Brilliant.
But before Marilyn could take this to trial, she needed to take it to an inquiry judge. And I had no idea what that was, so I had to look it up. But Ed, do you want to like define this? Because I'm not sure. I still am not sure that I get it.
Yeah, I can define that. So like a judicial inquiry or a judge?
An inquiry judge.
So a judicial inquiry is basically like a formal investigation into a matter of public concern. And it's essentially like a judge is assigned to take a look at a case that has some suspicious circumstances and decide if there's enough evidence to open an investigation or take it to trial. So the difference is this isn't like a trial where someone's convicted or sentenced. It's really the end of it is like, yes, there's enough evidence to move forward, is the best way I
Okay,
can
that
kind of
makes
put it.
sense.
Yeah.
Well, so they bring in a bunch of witnesses, I guess, to speak in front of this inquiry judge. And after hearing everything, the judge is like, oh, yeah, there is enough evidence for sure.
Mhm.
The judge says, quote, "There is enough evidence to make a reasonable assumption that a crime had been committed. The murder of Jami Sherer," end quote. So on January 8th, 2000, Steven Sherer was arrested on first-degree murder charges and his bail was set at $1 million. While waiting for trial, police were able to get a search warrant for one of Sherry Shearer's homes, that's
Mhm.
Steven's mom.
It's his mom,
And
yeah.
guess what they found?
Jamie?
No,
Oh.
that weird blue suitcase that
Oh,
Steven
yeah.
was always like carting around with him.
Yeah,
And like you had guessed, at first they were genuinely nervous that Jamie's remains were in that suitcase.
sure.
But when they opened it, they were so bewildered. I think they still are. The suitcase had a bunch of Jamie's clothing, like everything from her lingerie to bikinis to t-shirts.
So weird.
And also in the suitcase was like all of the couple's financial records. And Jamie was like really careful and meticulous about that stuff. So everything was like filed neatly.
Yeah, like in a safe or something, but
Yeah. So he's carrying that with her clothes and their wedding photo album was in there.
what a weirdo.
So weird, right? Like, and not like a fun, quirky weird, like a
No, like a serial
you're a
killer weird.
psychopath weird.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So on May 3rd of 2000, the case against Steven Sherer begins. And I always think it's kind of interesting what defendants wear to court. I think we've talked about this in another episode. And remember, I told you that Steven was always real flashy with his bleached mustache and his
Mhm.
Miami Vice getup. Well, he was definitely going for like the I'm sad and pathetic vibe to gain sympathy from the jurors. Like,
That's exactly the point. Yep.
exactly. He stopped dyeing his hair and his mustache. So it was like this nondescript, like dirty dishwater brown color. And his like suit was all disheveled and mismatching. And
Yeah.
it was like, he had literally gone from this like big flashy man on campus to this sad, weak little man, like, or at least pretend to be. So prosecutor Marilyn, a badass babe, begins with her opening statement. She tells the story of like this beautiful, vibrant young mother who was brutally attacked and beaten and just so emotionally and mentally abused by this cruel and cold-hearted husband, the one person who had stood in front of their friends and family and vowed to love and protect her. And Marilyn also talked about Steven's obsession for control, like over everyone, but especially Jamie. And how did he get that control? Through blackmail. That's part of the reason he was recording Jamie engaged in all those sex acts. And like, it wasn't just for his own pervy voyeurism,
Yep.
but also to have something to hold over her head.
That makes sense now. I never even thought of that aspect.
I know. So when it was time for Steven's lawyer to speak, he acted like this was just one big old joke. Like, it was so amusing how silly these pesky murder charges were. And it was amusing how flimsy the case against Steven was. And he was like, nobody even knows if she's dead. And like, it was just so funny how Steven was just a poor, sad widower who was being railroaded by the police.
Oh, yes. Woe is me.
And the defense attorney's like total basic argument was pretty much, yeah, Steven's a dick and you probably don't like him. Nobody really does, but a lot of people are dicks and that doesn't mean they murdered someone.
That's
They
you
said,
know what? That's true. That I'm sure the only theory they can hang on to is that she probably ran away, and
Mhm.
yeah, and they have to acknowledge that Steven is a jerk. But to be completely fair, it's true. I mean,
Yeah.
you can be a jerk without being a killer, and also like in this case, that her scent stopped at that bus stop. So that's like a logical
Mhm.
inference, and there's no body, and that's what makes these cases so hard to prosecute because there's no evidence. So I can see where these kind of struggles, you got to latch on to something.
No, 100%. And like the defense's theory was just that. She ran away, she left her car in that parking lot, hopped on a bus, and went by. Like, that's it. So over the next few weeks, we're in trial, and the prosecutor brings in a ton of witnesses, including Toby Parker, Bettina, that was the ex-girlfriend who Steven beat up so badly she had to be hospitalized.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought in the woman, the 16-year-old, who now was a grown woman, who Steven had dated in 1991. We're going to call her Connie. So Connie talks about how Steven, like I said, always wanted her to wear Jamie's clothes. He wanted her to engage in group sex. And this 16-year-old, thank
She's
God, was
16.
exactly like, what? And she
Dude,
said no to him.
good for her. I'm surprised she's alive for saying
Thank
no
God.
to him.
Yes, I know. I'm like so proud of this girl for being like so brave
Yeah.
at 16 to tell this man no.
Mhm.
And she also brought up this weird stain on the Shears carpet that was like, I think at the bottom of the steps. And Steven had told her that one day during an argument, he accidentally hit Jami and made her nosebleed.
Oh, yes, the old nosebleed or period. Those are the big 2 that people go to whenever blood shows up.
Always. Yep. So a friend of Steven's was called to testify. He corroborated Connie's story about the stain on the carpet, how there was an argument and a bloody nose. Investigators did figure out that Steven had paid for that carpet to be cleaned, and he had purchased a new carpet after Jamie's disappearance. That's why police never knew about it.
Right. Big red flag, though.
Mm-hmm. So the defense filed 2 motions, which thank goodness the judge denied. One was to dismiss all charges due to the lack of evidence, and the other was to try and get a different charge. Like, they didn't think first-degree murder was appropriate because they didn't believe the prosecutor had proved that there was premeditation.
Right.
And the judge was like, no,
Nah.
dismissing all of that. No. So the defense made a couple mistakes, big mistakes. And the first one was trying to get the sex tape of Toby Parker and Jami admitted as evidence. But the prosecution did a really good job with their witnesses, like one after another, talking about what a violent scumbag was. So the defense like wanted to show the sex tape to be like, oh, would this wonderful super mom, angelic mother engage in such crazy, wild, scandalous activity? Ultimately, the judge was like, we're not allowing that tape to be played. But like, I think that was a major backfire for the defense.
Well, yeah, if you're gonna use that to try to help your client, I mean, all it does is show that she was all drugged up,
Yes.
and Steven's directing this, like, that's backfiring is the word. Like, what an idiot.
Right.
What a
Like,
stupid defense.
I don't know if this was the defense attorney's first day on the job, but they made that mistake. And then there's another one. So this defense attorney evidently had no idea like how scent dogs work.
Mhm.
And remember how I told you, like, they found Jamie's car, they had a scent dog track from the car to the bus stop.
At the bus stop, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the scent dog handler was like, hold on a second. And like, this is all happening during the trial.
Mhm.
He's like, hold on a second. Like, where did you get that piece of clothing of Jamie's that my dog sniffed? And the police are like, oh, well, from her dirty laundry bin.
That she shares with Steven?
Exactly. The laundry bin
Like
that she shared with Steven. So everyone realizes, and again, this is like in court, they realized that the scent dog wasn't following Jamie's scent. The dog had been following Steven's scent.
Oh, man. That's
So the
botched.
dog sniffs this piece of clothing, sniffs the car seat, which had been pushed all the way back, and that's the most recent scent in the car. He or she picked up on Steven's scent on the car headrest and the seat, and followed the scent to the bus stop, where he then got on a bus after he dumped her car.
I love watching these kind of flimsy defenses get annihilated in court because
Me
it adds a
too.
level of like embarrassment to the defense attorney and the perpetrator.
It's great, and it's just amazing because like this defense attorney made such a big deal about the dog handler being an expert. This is gonna make the case. Womp womp.
Yeah.
Frigging dumbass. So jurors go into deliberation, and they like were pretty quick to agree that Jami was definitely dead. But the jury had trouble deciding what the charge should be. Like, was this premeditated? Was this heat of the moment? So, after several days of deliberations, the jury did reach a decision. And on June 8th, 2000, Steven Sherer, who is now 38 years old, he was found guilty of first degree premeditated murder and guilty of second degree felony murder. And, like, apparently Steven was just, again, like the Duvall brothers, he
Oh,
was
yeah,
just
just
so, like,
what?
completely shocked with the guilty verdict, but that shock quickly turned to anger, surprise, surprise, and he began this ridiculous outburst in court that he's innocent. When Jami was found alive, everyone in there could go to hell. And his next outburst was directly at Jami's mom. He yelled, "Fuck you, Judy," as he was handcuffed and let out of the courtroom.
Why is Judy catching strays? What'd she have to do
Right?
it? Like, he killed Jami, not her.
Yeah, why are you mad at her? Like, I
Jeez.
don't get that part.
No, that's weird.
So he was later sentenced to 60 years in prison. He was originally at Washington State Penitentiary, also referred to as Walla Walla State
Walla
Prison.
Walla, yep.
And that's where, like, the Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway, is. Kenneth Bianchi, who's one half of the Hillside Stranglers,
Mhm.
and even Ted Bundy spent time there. So now I know this is long, but one more thing. This case is not over. Steven just keeps coming up with more ways to be an asshole. In June of 2004, a newspaper out of Vancouver, Washington, printed an article about, quote, "Imprisoned killer found guilty of plotting arson," end quote. Can you guess who this imprisoned killer was?
I can.
41-year-old Steven Sherer. He and his cellmate attempted a plan to burn down the home of Judy, Jami's mom. And remember who also lives there? Tyler,
Tyler.
his own child. He tried to murder his son.
That is as egomaniacal as it gets. And I changed my mind. Your teeny weeny energy is a perfect description for this guy.
Exactly. And actually, due to the 3-strike rule in Washington, this trying to plan this arson is what led to him being LWOPed, as Anne Rule says, life without parole. LWOPed.
So cool.
Well, that is the very sad story of Jami Sherer. And Steven is 66 years old. I looked him up today, still rotting away in prison. Guess
Good.
he can't bleach his mustache in prison.
Good. Someone will bleach it for him, I'm sure.
So hopefully
That
he
that didn't
has
even
a
make sense.
no, but I liked it. F
That's
that guy.
no one's bleaching your mustache. Take that.
Take that, Steven.
Oh my god, that's quite a story. And I think it's scary to think these people exist, and we know damn well that they do. But I guess the lesson that comes out of this case is that the people if people around you that you're closest to are getting bad vibes about someone that you're attracted to or that you're starting a relationship with, like these people know you better than anyone. So if they're getting the heebie-jeebies about somebody, like it's probably for a good reason, and maybe you should think twice, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's going to do it for the first episode of our December block, which we're revisiting all of our blocks from the months that have led to this point. And next week we're
Mhm.
dipping our toes back into the thrill killer waters with another crazy case out of New Jersey. And ironically, it's right near the ocean, so you could quite actually dip your toe in this story. How's that?
Next week is going to be rough. I was researching right before we jumped on to record, and like, I am so angry already about next week's case. So just be prepared for a lot of creative insults.
Cannot wait. It's my favorite part is just listening to what you come up with. It's like
I
Mad
get
Libs.
so hype. Yes. We should have murder
Instant
unscripted Mad Libs.
I'm liking this. I'm like, there's a mini game in here somewhere.
That is brilliant. Well, stay tuned for next week when I'm generally angry, but really angry for this one. So mad. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, check us out on Facebook, Insta, TikTok at Murder Unscripted. Check out our website, www.murderunscriptedpod.com. And you can also shoot us an email at murderunscriptedpod@gmail.com. That is it for us. Have a great night. Be nice. Don't be a dick. And remember, perverts don't wear signs that say they're perverts.
If they made signs, the holiday season's right around the corner. So there's no better time to buy a pervert sign for the pervert in your life.
on Etsy, and we'll link it in the
Perfect.
show notes. So another thing that I feel like the book and interviews kind of made a big deal out of, that there were no underwear in the duffel bag, which I'm like, maybe she wanted to go commando. Like, move on.
I haven't worn underwear in 6 years.
TMI. So in the book, Anne Rule uses not synonyms, pseudonyms.
Pseudonyms, yeah.
It's like,
She
I know,
uses
it's not a
cinnamon.
synonym.
It's her favorite spice.
That's a cinnamon. So she uses, what did I just say? Pseudonyms.
You could say alias.
Aliases. She uses other names for the people. Oh my god, Lucy's under me snoring. I thought it was someone talking.
That's what it sounds like, a dude talking.
No, it's my puggle snoring.
Yeah, remember, you know how I'm cool with, like, all my exes? All my exes' parents, not so much.
No, not so
'Cause
much.
most of it was my fault. All of it was my fault.
I'll just leave it on that.
Yeah.
And apparently Jami, like, loved M&Ms, and Steven wouldn't let her have them.
God, that's all. If I deprived you of M&Ms, you would literally chew my hand off.
110%.
I'm confident about that. Although, because we're not a couple, so I mean, eat as many M&Ms as you want, for real.
I will, thank you. So he would just stand outside and stare at the building.
Through the windows.
At her.
Get it?
He would
That was a Microsoft joke.
Oh, but I'm bumped.